Most of us live disconnected from the natural world, but I'm going to tell you a story about reconnecting through a little owl I named Alfie. Alfie didn't look like much of a Zen master when she was first found as an abandoned orphan on somebody's lawn, but she did survive her infancy, and she thrived, although her wing feathers were delayed. But after she molted, she looked perfect, and I started to get her in shape for her eventual free-flying existence. And she vanished, and I thought, well, that was nice. I guess that's it. But a week later, she came back, and she centered her activities around our backyard. And all of this was happening very coincidentally when COVID was shutting down human activities and letting animals around the world range more widely, while humans were more or less confined to our homes and our gardens and suddenly paying more attention to our relationships, the things that nurture and that help to soothe us through that really terrible time. And I had a lot of time for watching Alfie. Alfie soon acquired a love interest, who I named +1. And even though I studied wild birds and their behavior for a living for a decade, what was really interesting was the slow development of their relationship. Alfie was very tentative at first. She wasn't trusting. She didn't accept his gifts of food at first, but then she slowly did. And then they got closer together. And then they bonded. And I started to see the usual miracles that happen all around us that we mostly never get to witness. Throughout all of this, what continued to impress me was the role of history, of relationship, and of bonding that made them individuals, just as our histories, our relationships, and our bonds make us individuals. Alfie turned into a very competent mother, doing everything that was necessary to make sure that her babies got what they needed. They thrived. They went off to find their own owly lives. And through all of this, Alfie's trust in me remained constant. One day, even though I had not interacted with her directly for several months, she came down low enough for me to reach up to her. I'm going to show you a very brief video. Listen to her word for love. You won't find that call in the field guides. Watch how she leans into the pleasure of our shared touch.
Oh, yeah.
And then she says, "Hey, where are you going?" She became a truly new lens on the world for me. And she raised an enormous question for me, which is, why don't we know that the world is populated by relational beings? Is our disconnect part of human nature, or is it something we are taught? What have other people been taught? Well, in indigenous cultures, in South Asian beliefs, in East Asian philosophies, the teaching is that the world is full of relationships, that the world is always material and spiritual together at the same time. The world is a sacred place. And the role of humans is to maintain the balances that keep the world going. But in the West, a different story took hold. And that story is that humans are better than everything else in the world, that we're the only things that matter, and that the world is here to serve us. And the philosopher Crispin Sartwell says that this disconnection, this devaluation of the world, is both the foundational and the worst idea of Western thought. It means that the world is here to serve us, to give us everything, and we owe the world nothing. We have no responsibilities to the world. You know that there are bills of rights, declarations of rights, no bills of responsibility, no declarations of responsibility. This is the sun at midday last July. If you're having trouble seeing it, so was I. I was also having trouble breathing, and I was wondering and worrying greatly about Alfie and her babies and all of the other aerobic Olympians that we call birds, for whom air is everything. What was happening in their nests while I was struggling to breathe? Trees are the easiest and cheapest way of taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, but we're letting the forests burn. Across Canada, across the western US, in the Amazon, in Australia, and elsewhere. While oil companies reap record profits, they take no responsibilities. 50 years of climate talks and climate agreements have changed nothing in the trend. And that's because a long time ago, we set the world's value at 0. Only rights, no responsibilities. In my lifetime, the human population has tripled, and we take almost half the land area for growing food, to say nothing of the trillions of animals that we yank out of the ocean, with predictable results. Since I was in high school, since the first Earth Day, wildlife populations have dropped by more than half. The birds that I so love have lost 3 billion members, a quarter of their population across North America, something that is very obvious to me during the migrations. Nowadays, about 70% of the world's birds are basically chickens. 96% of the animals are basically cows, pigs, and human beings. We don't think about this. We don't know about this. We don't feel these calamities because our education instills and finalizes our disconnection. When we get our diploma, we don't know where our food, water, energy, or materials come from. We don't know where our waste goes. We don't know who lives among us, but we do know how to shop. We've been indoctrinated into the cult of consumerism so that we can buy and live disconnected from the consequences. We don't know where our lives come from. What would it look like to love the world instead? The tech revolutions that are needed for long-term survival will require a revolution in values, because all technologies serve the values that send them. Moral revolutions always seem unlikely, almost silly to talk about, until they happen. And we've had quite a few moral revolutions, large ones, small ones, because real human progress is always driven by changes in values. And values are the most scalable thing. They're the perfect accessory. They go with everything, and we take them everywhere we go. So let's retire our disconnect. Let's embrace the reality of the miracle of our living family. If you try to wrap your mind around the true age and depth and diversification of life on Earth, it is so mind-boggling that attempting to connect with it can almost seem like a religious experience. The Pope thinks it's religious. Paul Greenberg and I think it could be religious, but it can also be a very literal endeavor. We can reconnect our fractured landscapes to allow some coexistence with all the other beings that live on this planet, allow them their movement and their migrations, everything from elephants to migrating crabs, if we want to let them. Last month in Chicago, during migration, 1,000 birds died one night after hitting one building that had been asked to turn their lights down, but they didn't care. In New York City a few years ago, a similar problem disoriented thousands of birds around the tribute lights for the 9/11 memorial. But it turns out that just shutting the lights for 20 minutes an hour was all it took to let the birds reorient and to pass. Philadelphia has decided to simply let the birds get by. So what do we do Monday morning? All it takes is a desire to reconnect the world in its wholeness and to elevate ourselves from transactional to relational beings, to be fully human and humanized. Whatever you're thinking, doing, or building, you can do it with the whole living world in mind. There's no end to the creativity and the disruption that can be caused. Maybe we can grow most of our food without using 99% of the land, water, pesticides, and fertilizers that we currently use. The amount of ideas, the possibilities for this are completely endless. My dream is to reconnect a world of living abundance, human dignity, and the future in everything that we think and work on. Tech alone can't save the world, but hearts can. So try to make sure that hearts will. There is nothing more scalable than letting yourself into the miracle of this living world, the family of life. Alfie taught me that even owls have a word for love and a need for love, and that just a little care can take you wherever you care to take it. And that's the story of Alfie and me that I came to tell you today. Thank you very much.